KC-135R Stratotanker crashes over in northern Iraq on 12 March 2026. 6 fatalities altogether, 6 crew members on board that. 2 separate KC-135 aircraft collide. One is able to make it back to Tel Aviv airport and land safely. I'm going to give you the background on what has happened and what we know now almost a week after that terrible, terrible crash. The 2 aircraft involved, the tail number was 623556. That's the airplane that crashed. The other tail number was 638017. And it landed safely back at Tel Aviv airport. The history behind the KC-135 is kind of fascinating. This is an aircraft that started its life as the Boeing 707 back when the jet age started back in the 50s and 60s. These are very old airplanes. They were designed and built and put into service by the U.S. Air Force back in the 1960s. These airplanes are older than the Beatles. I mean, this is really an old aircraft. But they do a job, and they do it terrifically. And so in support of Operation Epic Fury, these aircraft will carry 200,000 plus pounds of fuel to refuel jet fighters and other aircraft that have refueling capability so that they can continue to do their mission. They are not logistical aircraft. They are warplanes. I'll explain the difference between that in a minute. But they are out there in harm's way, right out on the front lines, refueling our jet fighters so they can get back into the fight. The R designation on the KC-135 came a number of years ago when they took that little, looked like a vacuum cleaner motor off of the engines and put a decent size jet engine on it. Kind of updated it for the 21st century. But the larger engines is where the R designation came from. Now, how does a KC-135 relieve another airplane in a war zone? Because I think this is really important for us to understand what exactly happened and why the one airplane crashed and the other airplane made it back. All right. In the Air Force and in the Navy as well, there are a ton of acronyms, and acronyms are just basically abbreviations for long expressions. And a lot of times we live by the acronyms and we don't even know what they stand for. But the first one that's important to us here today is the ATO, and the ATO is Air Tasking Orders. And so an Air Tasking Order will be given to, in a war zone, right? In this case in particular over there in Iran, it'll be given to give the big picture of what needs to be done, at least for the day or the week. And they get refined rather often. Then specifically, there's a thing called a spins, and spins are not like an airplane spinning, but it's a special instructions. That's the abbreviation for it. And those might get updated by the hour. So when you've got an air tasking order and you need to adapt it a little bit or change it a little bit, they will issue a spin. And so between the ATOs and the spins, this aircraft that's taken off, tail number 8017, to go relieve 3556, will know then exactly what their mission is. Now, there's a difference between logistical flying in the military and war designated flying. And so my background was I was a war designated pilot, and you do different types of missions. What is a logistics pilot? A logistics pilot's going to fly something with a C in front of it, like a C-5 or a C-130 or a C-141, one of those airplanes where they're taking cargo over in support of missions. And there's tons and tons of things that need to get over. They need to take tanks and helicopters and all sorts of supplies and everything else and over to a war zone. Their mission is flying back and forth between, where they get their supplies and where they hand off their supplies. A warfare designator is somebody that understands and is trained in how to get in and out of a war zone. And that really has a lot of tricks to it. Now, in terms of what does one KC-135 refueler relieve another KC-135 refueler, they will have a pre-assigned refueling track. So on that track, and the tracks are usually between 50 and 150 miles long, they'll be at somewhere between 20 and 30,000 feet. And that's all pre-planned. They'll know exactly where the other one is. There'll be a pre-designated point. And let me show you this. This is what it looks like, a typical track. Now, this is not the track that these guys were on, but this is one, it's called an anchor pattern. And typically it involves a few things. It involves an anchor point. And if you can see right there, that triangle that I'm circling, all right, that's the anchor point. That's where the tanker will come back to and rendezvous every time. Then they start their left-hand turn back out for their 50 to 150 mile run. Then they come back into that anchor point. Off to the distance will be the receiving aircraft. Now, the receiving aircraft could be any sort of fighter jet, anything that is able to be refueled will be out there well out of the way, so they don't get involved in the refueling process, because it's very intricate how they refuel. And so they have to have these long 50 to 150 mile legs, because you don't want to be trying to turn, right, as you're hooked up to the refueler. You want to do your refueling on straight and level. So they'll fly to the boom operator, will fly down the hose to the receiving aircraft. The receiving aircraft will line up. He'll couple onto that, and then the two of them stay right there the whole time as fuel is coming down that hose out of the refueling aircraft into the tanks of the receiving aircraft. Well, it's very precarious, as you can imagine, and extremely dangerous. But our armed service folks do it all the time, and they do it very safely. That's not what happened here. It wasn't that a refueling, a receiving aircraft somehow bumped into the tanker. It was that two tankers bumped into each other. Now, how in the world could that happen? Well, the anchor point is really important to our understanding. So hold on to the anchor point. There's going to be a control time that the one aircraft is coming out to relieve the other aircraft, and then there's an assigned altitude block. And typically, the relieving aircraft, the relieving tanker will come in 1,000 feet above just altitude separation. That's all pre-briefed before it even leaves the ground. They'll come in 1,000 feet above, and they'll hang out there until they make communication with the aircraft that they're relieving. They'll talk over the radios about, how they're going to do the handoff. And a lot of it is pre-scripted already. They've been trained for this. And then they'll go down and they'll join up on the other aircraft, and they'll do what's called formation flying. Now, what's formation flying? Formation flying, you've seen this a lot. Anytime there's a flyover on a sports event and you see the 4 or 5, jets fly over, that's formation flying. Typically, jet fighters will always have a wingman, and they'll be right there. I did a lot of formation flying back in the day and trained other pilots on how to do formation flying. Typically, what you'll do is you'll come up underneath the other aircraft. You'll find a point on that aircraft that's a good point, and a point on your windscreen, and you'll line those two up, and you hold on to that point, and you're adjusting your power, your airspeed, and your altitude to keep that spot. So it's a little bit of a ballet, because they're moving forward and backwards just a little bit, and you got to stay right there in that spot. It's called relative motion, and relative motion is really it's difficult sometimes to adjust to. It takes a lot of training. And so these guys would have been trained in formation flying and appreciating that relative motion until they get right to that spot, and then they lock right in and they keep themselves lined up in formation. This may have been what went wrong on this flight, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, so we've got our anchor point. We've got the tanker orbit over here. You can see out down here, that's where the relieving tanker would stay. He'd come in at that point. Typically, he's going to get there 20 to 30 minutes early so that they can do a debrief and a handover, but they're in a war zone over there in Iran. So things most likely are different in terms of the handoff. And again, I'll discuss that in a minute, right? Then the outbound tanker, once he's done, he's out of fuel and he's getting ready to relieve, he's going to take this big wide left-hand turn, and he's going to exit out on the top of our screen here, while the next receiving aircraft over here in this holding pattern comes on over to the anchor point. They make a turn, they get hooked up, and then they refuel all the way back down, get done refueling. Tanker comes back to the anchor point. Next receiving aircraft comes up, joins up on them. They do another turn, they hook up, out they go and refuel. And so it goes until either the tanker is out of fuel or there's no more receiving aircraft to be refueled. And that's how it works. So that's how a tanker orbit works. Now, next, the relief tanker always arrives, like I said, 20 to 30 minutes early, so that both tankers are in the same frequency. Now, that might have been one of the issues here. The other issue is this. It was nighttime. It was 9 p.m. local time over northern Iraq. So they were doing all of this in the dark. That makes formation flying that much more difficult. Typically, formation flying is done during the daylight hours, so you have all those visual cues that I talked about from the cockpit. A lot of those visual cues would not be there when it's nighttime. So again, that might have been an extenuating circumstance in all of this. They'll typically show up and they'll talk and they'll do a brief. Now, when it's not wartime, they can just do it over an open frequency. During wartime, they're going to do it one of two ways. They're either going to do it over a secure frequency, an encrypted frequency, or they're not going to do it at all. There's going to be no communication. I flew several missions back in the day, back during the Cold War, that were stealth missions. There was no communication at all. The whole thing was pre-briefed. You would get to an entry or exit point, and at that entry or exit point, which would be some point out over the water, you would simply go Nordo. You go no radio. You'd go completely stealth. You'd turn everything off, including the exterior lights on your aircraft. So you're black, you were dark, and you weren't communicating, you weren't squawking, you weren't transmitting to anybody. Nobody on the planet knew where you were. And so you'd go out to your operating area at the designated time, and then again at the designated time, you'd go down to your altitude. These guys, in this case, they'd join up. I don't think they went to that extent here with this. I think they probably tried to talk to each other over a secure frequency, but it could be that they weren't talking at all, and they were trying to do a stealth turnover. If they were doing that, that would explain how one airplane got tangled up with another airplane. Even so, even if they had done a secure frequency handover with each other, it's still possible that when they got down there in the dark and they did that forming up for just a few minutes, that the relative motion wasn't easy to accept. And you're going to see the damage on the airplane that made it back. And I'll explain what the damage is all about and why I think it was in that formation portion that all of this happened. So now they're going to get out there. They're going to coordinate with the AWACS airplane. The AWACS is the Airborne Warning and Control Systems aircraft. And that's another 707 style airplane back from the 1960s. It's got a big dish on top, and it's got a dozen or more people inside on computers, and they're the big command center in the sky talking and coordinating every aircraft. All right, the new tanker holds for 10 to 20 minutes, and they offset by 1,000 feet. I think I said that already. Typically, there's a relief brief, a discussion that they have on a frequency, but if they didn't, this time there wouldn't have been a relief brief at all. So that's the setup. That's how one tanker relieves another tanker in a war zone. Now, what happened here, or what likely happened here, because we don't know for sure exactly what happened, and we're probably not going to know because the military is very stingy with information on these things. There may be an internal secure briefing, that's secret briefing that they give internally at some point. This is not the NTSB. They're not required to come out with a report in 30 days. Or a year from now, we might not get much more information than we got just the two airplanes collided with one another, and that was it. The military will do their own internal investigation. So the one aircraft, the receiving aircraft, 8017, that was relieving 3556, the airplane that crashed, most likely during the handover or formation join-up of 8017, came into contact now with 3556, the airplane that crashed. How would they come in contact with each other? Well, let me show you the pictures of the damage to the aircraft. This first picture is not the best picture. You can see we got I kind of crudely circled it up here. Top of that tail is missing. Let me show you a better shot of this. Okay, there you go. Now you can see all the damage. See where the American flag is there? And you can see how much it's just torn apart. Fortunately, the rudder didn't come off. That would have been fatal for this aircraft. They had enough rudder to still fly the aircraft safely, but the top of that vertical stabilizer was completely sheared off. That's the point where they most likely flew underneath the other aircraft. You remember relative motion? You got to slow it down, slow it down, slow it down, get right in the slot and sit there. If they don't get that relative motion under control, you can keep going. And if your vertical stabilizer is too close to their wing, you're going to scrape the underneath side of that wing. If you scrape the underneath side of the wing of the other aircraft, you're going to ruin the ailerons. You might take an engine off the airplane. You're going to do catastrophic damage, which it sounds like what happened here. Clearly, the other aircraft couldn't stay airborne. Everybody died on the aircraft. And you can see the point of impact here with this aircraft. This aircraft was able to veer off, make their way back to Tel Aviv to land. They got back about, I think, if I got my timeline right, about 5 hours after they departed. They circled for a little bit off of Tel Aviv airport. That was probably for two reasons. One would be to burn off some fuel. The other would be to probably get somebody to take a look at the damage on their aircraft. If I'm flying this airplane, I want to know how much damage I've got before I go back into the airport. So I can do that while I'm sitting up there burning off fuel, but they're going to have to burn off fuel to get light enough to come back and land. So that's all that happened. But it most likely happened during the join up handover portion, that brief little bit of formation flying that they do. The vertical stabilizer damage is consistent now with being struck by either the underside of another aircraft or the underside of a wing, the fuselage or the wing. Now, ideally, the relief tanker arrives on the track, joins up visually with the on-station tanker. After a brief formation flight where they exchange information back and forth, they would do it over that secure frequency. The original tanker hands off to the receivers, now the aircraft that are still sitting out there and holding, that need to be refueled, to the new tanker that's in orbit, and it's just smooth as can be. He departs, goes back to base. They stay up there for the next 5 or 6 hours refueling aircraft until they run out of fuel in their tanks as well, and they have to go home. And I'm hoping that they come out with a report or they come out with some amplifying information on this. But my best guess here is that the aircraft relieving the aircraft on station struck that aircraft sometime during that formation portion of the flight. So to recap here, and I want to end this video by talking about the 6 crew members that perished on that flight. They're real heroes, and they deserve our attention, and they deserve all the honor that they should get for going out there and protecting us, protecting our nation. But to recap, 2 KC-135R refueling tankers collide midair during operational handoff, if you will, in support of Operation Epic Fury. 1 aircraft returns safely to Tel Aviv airport, while the other crashes, resulting in 6 fatalities. And let me bring up on the screen now the pictures and the names of the 6 that perished, starting with Major John Kleiner from Auburn, Alabama. Next is Captain Ariana Savino from Covington, Washington. Next is Captain Seth Koval from Morrisville, Indiana. Then Captain Curtis Angst from Wilmington, Ohio. Tech Sergeant Ashley Pruitt from Bardstown, Kentucky. And finally, Tech Sergeant Tyler Simmons from Columbus, Ohio. May God bless them all. Rest in peace. I'm Captain Steeve.